how do you solve a problem that you really didn't want in the first place? Everything was going good, but you got to choose. That's what we're discussing today on the Manifesting Guide. But just before we do that, if you're done with pushing and forcing yourself to get things done without results, come find your Manifest Without Force or Frustration gift at highertrueself.com. It's completely free. Now, let's get on with the podcast. So life is going on pretty normal, right? Where you live's good, your job's okay, or your work's okay, your relationships are okay, your health's pretty good, just like even keel, right? You know that kind of state of being. There's not real pending problems you've got to solve. There's no real big worries. It's just life's pretty stable. And then suddenly, from out of quote unquote nowhere, you got to make a choice. So say you're renting a house that you love. It's one of the best places you've lived. It's on a quiet street. Maybe you've got kids and they like the neighbors and there's good schools. And suddenly the landlord says, yeah, because of the market values right now, my tax bill's gone up, but I got to raise your rent. I'm so sorry. And you say, oh, no problem. I understand that. What's the new rate? And your landlord said, for me to cover everything and to stay up to speed with the market, your rent's going up 48%. So you're like, what? Okay, you deal with the shock. Now you're forced to make a decision. In that area of your life where it's not improving it, you're already where you wanted to be. So what do? You've got to solve the problem. You've got to powerfully choose. And I do not mean decide. Choosing is very different. Choosing is coming from a place of knowing what you want, and it's you charting your own course. Deciding comes from the Latin root decidere, which means cut off all other options. That's not what is a powerful manifesting position or mindset to come from. You want to choose, the power of choice. But still, you don't want to have to move, nor do you want to be paying that much more in rent. So what do? Well, when solving a problem, here's some tips. First, purge yourself of lower emotions. What do I mean by that? Have the cry, have the yell. Allow yourself to feel the grief and the loss because it's significant. You wouldn't make this change unless you had to. So feel your feelings. Second, don't talk about it. I know, this goes contrary to what we all want to do. Don't talk about it with everyone and their brother and the neighbor and your family. Allow it to settle into your unconscious that you've got a choice to make. Gather information, do your research. You can speak to someone who's, I would say, a really grounded, trusted advisor. Maybe, obviously, you have to speak with your husband or wife if you're married. But you know what I mean. They're not someone who is going to try to guide you down a particular path. They don't think, I know what's best for you. Those are fine to discuss your options. But don't do that until you've purged your emotions. Here's why. Your emotions are going to be at a fever pitch, and it's also going to activate fear of loss in whoever you're talking to, unless they're very grounded in a spiritual practice and they're on a Buddha path. Most people will get triggered in their own life experience. And so now you've got your own emotions, and you now have the friend's emotions, and you're going to be double whammied. And then what if you do that with 4 or 5 people, right? Okay, now you're processing not only your own emotions about the issue, situation, but everybody else's. You won't get clarity because if you think about a lake and a storm's coming through and the lake gets all churned up, you can't see to the bottom, there's no clarity, there's mud, and you need to get some clarity as to what's your most powerful next step. So stirring up the emotions, whether it is talking about it, whether it is thinking about it. So what do? Stop it. I know it's harder. It's easier said than done, right? But stop it. Notice how you feel after you talk to the person. Do you feel more worried? Do you feel worse? Or do you feel they helped you tap into your self-confidence? You've got this. You've pulled rabbits out of the hat before. You're going to find a solve here. And if they give you practical guidance, make note of it. You may not be willing to hear it at that point because the emotions could still be at a fever pitch and that lake is still all murky. And you're not able to get to clarity and see to the bottom of the problem you have to solve. Okay, so first step is purge yourself of lower emotions and be careful who you talk to, okay? Second step is focus on wisdom. So what am I talking about here? This is tapping into constructive thinking. This is being rational, this is being reasonable, and this is solving the problem from a perspective outside yourself. You may have heard people speak about being in a position of observing. So you're detached from the emotions of it and you're looking at it from the outside as if it were happening to somebody else. And what would you say to them? How would you guide them? And what's the space that you would hold for them to get to their own decision? This is where I would highly recommend that you tap into your true self or higher self. And in the show notes, I will put a link for you to get access to one of my favorite little mini meditations. It's about 5 minutes. It's the true self grounding process. So before you have to make a big decision or even get yourself out of the emotional state, it will remind you of your inner resources, that you've got this, and it will pull you out of that plane of emotional disturbance, like that lake that's completely full of the storm sediment being stirred up. So first, purge yourself of lower emotions. Be careful who you talk to. Second, focus on wisdom, rational, reasonable, constructive thinking. So if you can get to that place, then you're going to be able to recognize what usually sabotages good, solid problem solving. And what that is, they are false desires. Now, if you've been following my work at all and you've done the exercise of the wish list, and again, if you haven't, then I highly recommend you get the free gift, How to Manifest Without Force or Frustration, because you do get that exercise, the wish list process in there. And what the wish list process is, it pulls out your desires, your wishes, things that you'd like to experience, things you'd like to change, things you'd like to have in your life. It's a way, kind of a brain dump of everything that's been floating around that you want to change. So it could be fixing something in the car, a toleration, that something's been broken and you're just just accepting it. Or it could be, hey, I really would love to clean the carpets. Oh, these carpets are dirty. Just even little things like that, okay? Just do a brain dump of all your wishes, dreams, desires in the wish list process. Okay, so what am I talking about false desires? Well, those are the ones that go against what is for your highest good. Those false desires are those unmet wishes or longings. And you think, well, yeah, they're all unmet. But the false desires are those that are no longer relevant or even possible given where you are right now. So what does that mean? Because the work I do teaches people how to manifest the impossible. So here I'm saying there's false desires. Well, false desires are fueled by prior experience that are filled with emotions of either loss or like deep, deep desire. And anything that's not of an even keel, you got to be wary of, because it could take you down a false track, a false path. If you think about watching a mouse in a maze and there's cheese down one of the paths, well, the mouse is going to run down all the different paths until they find the cheese, right? But what if there's no cheese in that maze? But the mouse has been trained that there is always cheese in this maze. When I'm put in there, there's a prize. There's the cheese. And I'm going to keep searching until they get exhausted and they fall into a puddle on the ground of the maze and they can't move anymore. That's how most of us solve problems. So we train ourselves that there's got to be cheese there. There's going to be a success. I just stay in action. I know I can do it. I can find the solution. Just be in action, be in action, be in action. And then you go, I can't do it anymore. And you find that place of surrender. That's getting closer to being able to recognize your false desires. But let's talk more about that. False desires just breed discontent and dissatisfaction. Let me give maybe a practical example that you can relate to. So in this example, say the landlord says, hey, your rent's going up nearly 50% and I love you as a tenant, but I got to do what I got to do, what's right for me. Okay. So instead of identifying your criteria from a logical, rational, reasonable, constructive thinking mind, you start looking on the internet, you get in the car, you start doing tours, and you get all these property maps, and you get all the details about what it would move like to an apartment, because an apartment's so much easier than a house, and then you go into overwhelm. So you got this pile of maybe 20 different places you've looked at, and each one has a nice thing about it, but it doesn't have everything that you currently have. So pause, write down your criteria. What's the most important? What's the second most important? What's the third most important? And because if there's been a significant change, there's nothing you can do about it. The market rates have increased. The economy has changed, quote unquote. There's nothing you can do about it. So you need to adjust your thinking. So for example, if your landlord's been very generous and you've been paying well below the market value, and now things need to be sorted out and made fair and reasonable, rational thinking would say negotiate. Go to the landlord with a figure maybe in the middle of that. That's constructive thinking. Are you seeing it? Instead of being in reactive mode, that I got to move, pause, constructive thinking. So what's the most important? What's your highest criteria? I remember talking to a wonderful neighbor, and she went through this experience. And she said the most important thing is that we both, my partner and I, my husband and I, work from home. So we both need a space that's great as an office. So she knew what she was looking for. There had to be a second bedroom for one of their office, and there had to be a great kitchen dining room area that was large enough for them to make that into an office. So when she started looking, she knew what she was looking for. It didn't matter that there was nature around. That was a bonus if it was there. It didn't matter what floor it was on. Didn't matter. And then all of a sudden she started finding extra bonuses. Oh, there's 2 patios. Wow, I can have my meditation patio, balcony, and he can have his. And oh my gosh, there's a nature walk that I could take in the morning. It'll encourage us to exercise. So she found bonuses. But she likely would not have found that. She would have stayed in confusion had she not got what her criteria was. Obviously, the rent amount was a criteria. She made her decision within 3 days of being informed of what was going to happen with the rent increase. 3 days. Then another person could still be in that state of mind of worry and confusion because the emotions and, most importantly, the false desires that this person could find exactly what they have right now at a lesser rent. So how do you uncover false desires? Okay. I highly recommend listening to the True Self Grounding. And when you get into that place, when you're connected with your true self, your higher self, you're peaceful, you're disconnected from the worry mind, and your emotions are pretty even keel, focusing on the problem you have to solve, the challenge, and tune in and ask, what's so troubling about this? And you might just simply get, well, I don't want this to happen. That's fine. Write it down. What else is so troubling about this? Well, I've created what I love here and I don't want to have to change things. Great, write it down. What else is so troubling about this? And as you dig deeper, then you're going to get the core one, and that may be the significant criteria you have to solve. Okay? All right, hoping this was helpful. So when solving a problem, purge yourself of lower emotions. Second step, focus on wisdom, rational, reasonable, constructive thinking, and your true self can help you with that. And the third step is detect false desires. And most importantly, notice if you're like that little mouse in the maze and you know there's no cheese. You know there's no exact perfect what you've got right now, because life is asking you to change. Life is asking you to let go of what you've got or negotiate. Don't forget that one. All right. This is Aryana Rollins. Thanks so much for listening. And if you like the episode and you think it would benefit someone, please leave a review at podchaser.com and make sure you subscribe at highertrueself.com. Remember, when you are tapped in to your true self confidence, you have the capacity to make changes and navigate your life in powerfully successful ways. Bye for now.